Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word today. Glad you could join me for our time together again this Thursday morning. It's a beautiful sunny day. Today is opening day. If you're a Reds fan like me, which I don't think there's any other team possibly to root for in the entire world than the Cincinnati Reds, but today's opening day, so I've got my red shirt on today. And so I'm glad you could join me for our continued conversation and journey through Scripture and what it means for us and how we then apply it to our daily lives. Thanks for always saying good morning whenever you watch and joining me in this conversation together. So, today, we've reached another milestone. Today is daily word number 700. Number 700. Who would have ever thought 3 years ago that 700 days later we'd be still having this conversation? And so it's interesting how life has changed and times have changed, and this connection has remained important. So thanks for being with me. And during this, last night we had our final Lent Wednesday night. And again, we had good food around the table, salad and soup and bread and cookies that Mindy Heiler made. And many, many folks gathered around the table to continue our conversation about meeting Jesus at the table. And last night we talked about this dinner that was had at the home of Lazarus and Mary and Martha in honor of Jesus, because Jesus had just previously called Lazarus forth from the tomb. And, in that story from Sunday, Jesus wept. His best friend, they perceived, had died. And Jesus got caught in the emotion of all of his friends who were grieving his death. And so he called him forward, and then he arrives at the house for a celebration. They wanted to honor Jesus. And of course, the story happens, that Mary breaks this bottle of perfume on the feet of Jesus and washes it with her hair. It's this sign of a burial thing and what's about to happen. And we talked about a bit about that last night in conjunction with this particular text. I'm sure that Jesus would have known the Psalms. And he would have known Psalm 31 from his childhood. He might have, as a youth teenager, been asked to stand up and read this in the synagogue. The Psalms promise that Jesus' times were in God's hands might have sustained him in all of his life. What we don't know about Jesus, Joseph died at some point when he was a child. Jesus, we know after his baptism, went into the wilderness to be tempted. When he returned from that, he realized that Herod had arrested John and that John was going to be beheaded. We know that Jesus probably used the psalm to pray for himself and for his cousin John. And it's interesting, this text, as we thought about it last night, what all this must have meant for Jesus to know who God was and to have this presence of God in his life. This prayer, this Psalm's promise, is one that you and I should know firsthand. No pun intended with that. We should know it firsthand. It's when we need God the most. Now, sometimes it's mystical, when we have this thing happen to us and we're not sure what it's about. But many times, most times, that our hands, our times are in God's hands, are more earthly. They are flesh and blood hands of a father or a mother or a sister or a brother or a cousin or a neighbor or a pastor or someone who sustained us when the times are tough, when we need pulled forward in life. A teacher's hand, that guide us through our life. John, holding the hand of Jesus after he baptizes him and brings him up out of the Jordan River. we're reminded that God comes to us in these miraculous ways, and God comes to us in earthly kinds of ways. But either way, I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. So I went to the dentist yesterday. Had to have two teeth pulled. They've needed worked on for a while. Because of all my other health stuff with my legs, I've ignored it. But eventually teeth, if you ignore them long enough, they're going to hurt. Well, they did. And so I went yesterday to get them pulled. And the dentist was great, and the hygienist was great, and they did a great job, and they numbed me really well. But it was a fight to get the one tooth out on my right side. It was a fight. She kept saying, "You doing all right, Jim? You doing all right, Jim? This last piece is giving us a hard time." And she had to, felt like a tow truck in there pulling that tooth out of there. But I said, "Yep, I'm fine." And she said, "You're doing really good." We had this ongoing conversation in the midst of her having these tools in my mouth. And so, that I don't always like to give up my HIPAA in these situations. I don't want them to treat me differently, but, my email address and my paperwork kind of gives me up. And so we talked a lot about that, and we talked about patience. And the next patient that came, they were getting prepared, and she said, "Jim, you might want to stay because we might need you to pray for this next person." And so we talked a bit about that, and we kind of joked and we kind of didn't, because to me, there was this reminder for us. For that hour in the dentist chair, which seemed like forever, my times were in her hands, and she was great and did a great job. And it really wasn't as horrible as I thought it was. But then when it all got said and done, she said to me, "Jim, I probably need you to stay because of the next situation." I thought about that in light of this text. We trust in God, but our hands are also held by the hands of others through God. We ask God to be our feet and our hands. Psalm 31 is a reminder that we experience God's hand in mystical, powerful kinds of ways, and we experience God's hands through human hands that hold us to the very end. When Jesus said, at the very end on the cross, Jesus said, "Into your hands I commend my spirit." And so, friends, as we live our lives, as we share them with each other, as we are about to enter Holy Week, we're reminded that that's how this works, that God's with us and other people guide us along the way. So today, as has been a tradition for a long time, Dustin and I are going to opening day. I wanted to go to the parade. Dustin refused is a strong word, but he's not going to take me to the parade. It's too much walking. And so he's going to come here, and we're going to head out pretty soon and make our way, stop and get something to eat. And as always, when we go, Dustin drives. I just let him drive. And, it's going to be an interesting challenge with my legs, and getting to our seats. But then I'm always reminded, sorry, it's a little emotional, but I'm always reminded that today, while I have God's hand, today I have Dustin's hand. Who's gonna keep a careful eye on his old dad? And that's how we live our lives together. That's how important it is that we share in this together. We talked about it last night. We got done with our meal last night, and Carly came to me and said, "Jim, can you do me a favor? Can you write me a letter of recommendation?" I said, "Yep." So I did that first thing this morning and emailed it off to her. Got some children's church stuff done today. Sent a other couple emails that I had promised, responded to a couple text messages that I promised to respond to yesterday that I never got to. We through God, share our hands with each other. And that's so important and so powerful and such a gift of God. So that's our word for today. And I hope it's a good word for you. I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. So, I hope you know of God's love today that surrounds you and holds you close. My love for you. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great day.